Okay, are we on? Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Are people being let in?
Yes, we have 15 right now.
Oh, okay, so we haven't started, correct, Kristen?
I think, yeah, we're waiting for everybody to come in.
Oh, okay, so when everybody comes in, will we see them populated?
I'm keeping an eye on them. Yes, you can look under the participants.
Who's going to tell me when to start?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yep, I think we can start.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, many of you on your lunch hour, for our webinar on unlocking the power of CSBA. We are going to be speaking this afternoon about the services and resources that we provide our county board members. My name is Keith Bray. I'm the General Counsel and Chief of Staff for CSBA, and I'm glad to be here to help facilitate our webinar this afternoon. We do have a really good group of presenters that I would like to introduce to you. Amy is hopefully on your screen. She's not on mine, but if she will be shortly. Amy is our Assistant Executive Director for Member Services. Amy Christianson, like our other two presenters today, really comes from a place of knowing what board members want, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, because she's currently on the Butte County Board of Education. And she'll be talking to us today about training, as well as the roles and responsibilities of board members and county superintendents that represent the county office collectively. We have Bob Turk. Bob is our Chief Legal Counsel for District and County Office Education Legal Services. CSBA for really quite some time now has now been providing directly to our county boards and our district members legal services that actually require a contract to be signed, so that the legal advice that is given to you by Bob and his attorneys is confidential. Bob is also, in this case, a former board member when he was up in Plumas County. Plumas County is both the district and the county office, so he got to wear two hats every meeting, both as a district board member and as a county board member. And last but not least, I don't think I've ever used that expression before when it comes to Dennis Meyers, because he's usually very prominent in all of our discussions that we have and all of the trainings that we have that involve the legislature and governmental relations. He's our Assistant Executive Director. And like Bob and Amy, Dennis is a former board member. He represented Washington Unified School District in West Sacramento for many years before coming into lobbying at CSBA. So that's, and then there's Kristen Lindgren. She's a Deputy General Counsel for Legal, and she's going to be looking at your questions as they come in. She'll be able to answer many of them, but she'll also then inform me as the facilitator of the questions that we're then going to bring to the group to respond to. So we do have quite a bit of time allocated in our webinar this afternoon for questions and answers. We're going to start with trainings. As I mentioned earlier, Amy is going to go through that for us. We're then going to go to county board and office policies, which Bob will lead us through. Then back to something a little more specific and granular, which are the roles of county board members and county superintendents. And then very timely, Dennis will be giving us some budget and legislative updates before we get to our question and answer. So let's just get right to it, shall we? Before we do, I forgot, we have some housekeeping. Andy?
So if you have a question, please use the Q&A function on the toolbar, not the chat. It makes it easier for us to track and answer your questions if you use the Q&A. We'll answer questions toward the end of the presentation. Everyone here will receive a link to the video and the PowerPoint deck later on, so no need to take screenshots or try and scribble notes. Just enjoy the presentation, and there you go. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Andy. So our first speaker is Amy Christianson, as I mentioned before, and she's going to be talking about CSBA County Board trainings. Amy?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here today and talking about some of the things that CSBA does for its county board members. First is we're excited for the release of registration opens on June 6th for the annual education conference. This year it's held in San Francisco, November 30th to December 2nd. We are excited to have received over 250 workshops that are focused on County Office of Education and the roles and responsibilities and programs and services that are being provided. With the AAC comes a variety of other pieces. One is we have two keynote speakers that have been identified. On Wednesday, we have Thursday, actually, Sean Jenwright, who wrote the book 4 Points that will be sharing ways to engage students and really focuses on the mental health and the equity piece of addressing student needs of where they are and how to ensure that the adults focus on the relationship side of it. And then lastly, on Saturday, something that is a hot topic across the nation is college and career readiness and career exploration. So we have Mark Perna, who you can find information about him on his website and or NPR articles and speaking announcements that he has done to share the current trends in working with Gen Z and millennials as it relates to workforce readiness. As well as critical issue sessions that will be offered throughout the conference that are also, again, the conference, again, focused on County Office of Education. The conference committee has been really mindful to be aware of the many needs that are different than districts. And so they're ensuring incorporation of a variety of topics that will address county office board members' needs. One of the things that goes with the AAC that we've heard a lot about is San Francisco and safety. They have a brand new ambassadors program and there will be a video coming out. Highly encourage you to watch that. They've implemented a program with orange vest individuals that will be in between the Moscone Center and all the hotels. So we hope to see you at the AAC. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Next slide. CSBA also has a variety of training opportunities. We have both virtual and in-person opportunities. We offer Brown Act training, as well as the Masters in Governance series. We also host a series of governance consulting workshops, which means we can come to you for a customized workshops. With the number of new board members throughout the state of California, this has been a popular workshop opportunity for setting the directions and getting to know your fellow board members and colleagues and really beginning to work together collectively as we add new individuals. Next slide. The Masters in Governance schedule has been released. As you'll notice, we have a variety of opportunities for MIG training. All are in a virtual capacity. And so I highly encourage you to log into www.csba.org/MIG County Office of Education. They are facilitated by faculty who have experience and or having been a county board member or a superintendent and work with county board members. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to...
Amy, can you talk a little bit about how, if they were interested in MIG, how they'd go about signing up?
Absolutely. You would log into MIG and you log into the website and you would actually select the choices that you would like for the opportunities to take the 1 through 5 modules. And then you would participate with a cohort of other county board members throughout the state in participating in those courses. And they range from foundations and governance all the way through to student learning. And one of the ones that I think is going to be important in this coming year is charter authorization. We're going to, with the State Board of Education, moving forward to re-engaging charter authorizers to have the process come back into play. It's going to be important that county board members understand the process. And so that is one of the courses I think is going to be quite popular, as well as the access to the charter authorizing book that CSBA has produced to assist in guiding folks in that process.
Oh, that's a good point because the renewals they're ginning up again. So being able to tune in and get some advice would be great. It hasn't the MIG for our county board members is relatively recent in CSBA's history, right? And you were a part of helping put that together.
I absolutely was. I worked with a few other individuals, county superintendents and past board members, to create the curriculum and to design the content. It's been in existence for about 3 years now. We've had 2 cohorts of individuals go through. And so we would welcome the 3rd cohort and moving folks through this process.
That sounds really, really good. And it's really kind of, that's a great transition into what Bob is going to be talking about with respect to county policies and how CSBA has now been putting out a bank of those policies specifically for county board members. And so anything else to add, Amy, on either the AEC? What have, for example, at the AEC, with your experience, what have typically been the type of sessions that county board members have gone to?
Understanding the programs and services for students, governance has been a strong one, working collectively with the superintendent, and then getting the networking opportunity to connect with other county board members throughout, the variety of networking opportunities and experiences. The trade show floor has services that are being provided, coming with your team. So part of being on a governance team and shared governance is getting to know your fellow board members. And so just taking the time to come together and learn alongside each other, sharing the wealth and the opportunities and sessions that you go to, and then going back as a team and talking about those and what you're doing or what you could do to improve the services that you're providing to students.
I think that's a great point. And there's a level of, I may use the term solidarity, right? I mean, you're now at a conference with what, 2,500 to 3,500 board members and superintendents who come, and there's a sense of commonality, is there not?
There is. It really creates that unity and purpose. And, as you're going to hear later from Dennis, it really starts understanding that we're more alike than different. And that we come from a variety of, California is a large state and we have a lot of different experiences from where we live, which, goes to that local piece. But it's a way to come together and understand that we're all here for the students that are being served. And that in many cases, we have some commonalities that we can work together to collectively address the needs.
Well, thank you. So I think that's queuing up our next presenter this afternoon, Bob Turk. And I've already made the introduction. Again, a former board member who knows what it's like to be in the trench, along with the other 3 panelists that we have today. So Bob, why don't you get onto CSBA's gamut policy and share with our attendees today what we have to offer.
Will do. All right. Thank you, Keith. So as many of you already know, CSBA's Gamut platform, excuse me, is home to nearly 700 sample board policies, regulations, bylaws, and exhibits. Admittedly, though, majority of those sample policies were originally drafted, at least from the school district perspective. But it's important to realize that they're also drafted in a way that really calls for local engagement with the policy documents. So regardless of whether you were large or small, rural, urban, or a school district or a county office of education, sample policies are really intended to be revised and edited to suit local practices and needs. But of course, for county offices, this was a much bigger lift when those policies started as district policies. So it required a little bit more engagement and a little bit more revision going into those samples. So, county boards of education and county superintendents, as you know, have distinct and yet also overlapping roles that are really unique from their district counterparts. And this unique dynamic calls for some unique policies in some very specific cases that we'll talk about a little bit later. And over the many years, of course, county offices have noted this, and some of them have simply been taking district policies and trying to adapt them to varying degrees of success. So recognizing this need for our county board members here at CSBA, in about 2016, we started updating and maintaining dedicated county office of education policy resources. And we did this to help make sure that you have the appropriate tools to make sure that the samples are suitable for you to adapt and use for your local county offices. And actually, in a lot of respects, county boards now have a broader scope of resources than even our district members do. And this slide kind of covers that a little bit. So Gamut it's a unique program. It's created specifically for use by school boards and governance teams. And so a lot of that is built around the function of a district board or a district governance team. But depending on how you use the services and what you subscribe to, you can manage board meetings and policies. So you can simply access CSBA policies. But for counties, we've created, we've tweaked the program specifically for your access level. So you have access to, for example, in the policies, you have access to all of the district resources, but you also have unique access to something that we call a county policy manual type. It's exclusive to county offices. It gives you access to those county office specific policies that, again, I'll talk about here in a minute. It gives you access to county specific policy updates. Those are only available to county offices, both of those. But you also have continuing access to all of the district samples, as well as all of the district policy update packets that come out. So all of these samples for the districts that we've added to the county version of Gamut, they're clearly marked with a note to let you know, hey, this was drafted originally as a district policy. So make sure you put a little bit more care and attention into looking at that. But you can import any of these policies, whether it's from the county manual, the county updates, or the district ones directly into your county Gamut site and into your county policy manual. And when you do that, we also created a special option that allows you to designate what type of document that's going to be. So for example, in the district policy manual, you have the 4000 series, which is all about employees and employment within the district, right? Those 4000 series. Those are all board policies at the district level. But we know in the county office, that's really the purview of the superintendent. So those should not really be board policy. They should be superintendent policy. And the way that we've tweaked the system specifically for our county members is that it allows you to import those draft policies, those sample policies, and make a determination at that point. Do I want to create this as a board policy or as a superintendent policy? Employment's a real obvious example of how you could do that, but you can do this for literally any of the policy documents that are in there. You can add it as board or superintendent policy. It's another way that we've created a way for our county members to customize things to their local needs and practices. Like the district policies, county policies are updated quarterly. Update packets come out on the 15th of March, June, September, and December. Those are typically on the 15th. Those are going to be the district policies coming out. And then we put the county policy specific updates about a week out after that. We do this mostly to protect our districts from inadvertently adopting a county policy. So there's about a 1 week lag in there between the 15th of March when the packet comes out and when you'll see the county specific ones. And then of course you have access to our other policy tools like policy development workshops, federal program monitoring review instruments and things like that that'll help you keep your policies up to date and current. Next slide, please. So the other aspect that you have access to as CSBA members, you have access to our policy update webinars. These webinars are done as a collaboration between our policy consulting team and the attorneys from our CSBA legal services program. As we know, state and federal law is ever changing here. And as a consequence, so are our policies. On average, we're updating 100 to 125 policies a year. We put out a red line version of those policies, and they're annotated so you can see exactly what changes we made on the document itself. But sometimes those revisions do warrant some further explanation and discussion. So we've set up these webinars that allow you to get that information and for a little bit more in-depth explanation of why we made the changes. So our legal services attorneys go through explaining the changes in the law, and then the policy consultants talk about the specific policy impacts of those changes and how they are reflected in the sample policy documents. Specifically for county boards and for county superintendents and staff, This is a great opportunity for you to log in to the webinar, have an opportunity to talk to the policy consultants or the attorneys on the webinar and ask, how might a district policy work for your county office and how might you tweak it? And of course, you can always contact our consultants at policy@csba.org or one of the attorneys at legalservices@csba.org if you're unable to make that webinar and you have questions. So as I said, the next update packet's coming out June 15th. County policies will be out about a week after that, and then the webinar will follow on June 28th. Next slide, please. Okay, so I can talk about policies all day, but I know that's not everyone's idea of a good time. Not sure why. And this webinar, though, it's really all about resources that CSBA provides to county members. So I'm not going to get into the weeds of all of these policies listed, but I did want to just show you a few examples of some of the policies that we've created specifically for county offices of education. Most of these do have district counterparts, but in each one of these examples, the county board has a specific role that's unique from that of the district. So for example, with the budget policy, the education code requires the county office of education to develop and manage expenditures, develop a budget and manage expenditures in accordance with the standards and criteria adopted by the state board. But the education code also requires the county board of education to adopt an annual budget that's prepared by the county superintendent and then sent to the state superintendent after that adoption process. Each part there is separate and distinct, the role of the county board and the role of the superintendent, and yet they overlap and they have to work together. So it's a different process from what districts go through, and therefore you need a different and unique policy to go with it. Charter schools, mentioned earlier, this is another great example. Charter school petitioners can submit petitions directly to the county board for charters that are either going to serve students who would otherwise receive direct education and related services from the county office, but they can also submit direct petitions for countywide charters that are going to provide instructional services that aren't not generally provided by the county office, but are going to be provided across the county. And that's why they're countywide charters, right? So those are both examples that are specific to County Office of Education that's different from the district charter approval process. And then, of course, the governing board of a school district, when they deny the authorization or renewal of a charter petition, or if they revoke a charter, those are all subject to appeal that are going to come to the county board. So we've created specific charter policies for authorization, oversight, and renewal, and most uniquely for the appeal process that's specific to county offices of education. Similarly, you serve as the appellate body for expulsions and interdistrict transfers and things like that. Anytime you're getting into these kind of processes, it's very prescriptive in the law, right? When you're talking about due process and rights and the appeals process. So it's really important that you have unique policies that document those procedures. In addition, we do have a school board policy or student school board member policy for county offices. And I'm going to take just a quick minute to go over that in some more detail because Dennis is going to be talking a little bit later here in the webinar about some legislative changes that will affect that one. So if we could go to the next slide. So board bylaw 9150 deals directly with student board members. And in 2021, I believe it was AB 824 made it so that the County Board of Education, if you maintain one or more high schools, has the option to include one or more student board members on your county board. And it also made it so that a student can petition the board, and as long as that petition meets specific requirements, the county board has to receive a student board member. So once seated, the position of the student board member itself has some unique aspects to it. So for example, student board members can receive course credit for serving on the student or on the County Board of Education, but they cannot receive stipends. However, they are entitled to reimbursements for travel expenses, just like any other board member would be. Their votes are not counted in terms of whether or not a motion passes or fails. And their attendance is also not counted towards whether or not there's a quorum. But aside from that, they really are full-fledged board members and they're there to participate. But there will be some changes coming in the law that Dennis is going to be talking about here a little bit later. So I think that pretty much covers it for county policies and what we've been doing in the world of Gamut. So I'll turn it back over to Keith.
Thanks, Bob. I've got a few questions for you on the policies in Gamut, but before I get there, I know that Amy is going to talk a little bit about implementation because we're excited about this. July 1 is when the law that Bob mentioned, 824, goes into effect. And as he said, these are full-fledged board members. It was written in the law that they serve on committees, and committee meetings are arranged around student schedules as well. That all the information that you as a board member get, except for a closed session, goes to student board members. As a board, you decide whether they can take motions. Any kind of social event or whatever might be happening outside the boardroom that board members get invited to, student board members do too. So, and as Bob said, they've got preferential voting. And what that means is that when there's an item before the board, they vote first. That's what preferential voting means. Their vote doesn't count in the final total, but it's there to give the student board member the ability to influence. So there's really quite a change afoot. It's been with districts now for a couple of years, I think, at least 2 to 3 years. But Amy, you're on the ground floor on this up in Butte County. Why don't you share a little bit about what you see as some of the implementation issues that might take place?
I think some of the implementation issues come around having a policy that's been fleshed out and really had conversations at the board level. And so when I first heard about this about a year or so ago, and they knew that it was coming this July, I heard about it at the AEC in the fall. We began having conversations as a county board. We formed a small committee that the three of us worked on looking at CSBA sample policy on having a county board member, as well as some of our fellow surrounding counties. And we created a policy that fits our dynamics, transportation, other pieces. We decided from a local perspective that we wanted to give priority to students that were at one of our schools. Because we do have a program that serves high school students. And we also talked about the ramifications because we have a juvenile hall. And would it be prohibitive for a student that meets the qualifications? Could they attend virtually, as we are still offering the hybrid option for our meetings to engage them? And so we really had to walk through and think about all those pieces. So I think for me, it's for county boards to really think about and take a look at the CSBA policy, which is a phenomenal guidance. And gives you the structure, and then really localizing it and having some of those conversations as a board in an open session about what you want and what you expect from the student. I think that goes with that is the orientation. So when we bring on new board members, we have an onboarding process of bringing them in, understanding what we want from them and how we engage them. What is the Brown Act? What is the policy? So they fully understand all the pieces. They're students, and we shouldn't expect, just as we expect someone who hasn't been in education or someone joining the board as a board member who's elected to come with all that knowledge. And so how do we set them up for success in understanding the structure and that we treat them as an equal on our board, even though their vote doesn't count in the final tally. And so I think, so for me, some of those are the pieces that we really have to consider and think about. CSBA has a couple of training opportunities. We have a student board member program at the annual education conference. We also have some student pre-training that's beginning to happen. As we've heard loud and clear, we led focus groups this spring from our student board members, and they really want to be more active and effective. This group of individuals that in our high schools come with a lot more knowledge, and they want to be heard. They don't want to be looked at as someone who's just there to, that's nice, sit there and don't share your voice. They want to share their voice. They want to be engaged. They want to be civically engaged, as we encourage often, but now we have to create space to do that. And so some of it is, I think, just really listening to each other and figuring out as a board collectively how you embrace that individual voice as they join your board from whatever schools they come from.
Thank you for mentioning the trainings. Remember last year, we did a training at the Learning Institute. And then a subsequent training, I believe it was September or October, right? So we did 2 trainings. We typically try to catch the student board members as they take office in July, and then catch the a remaining crew after that. So we do really have quite a bit to offer your student board members who, Brown Act, whatever it might be, they have a pretty big interest in being trained on. So thank you, Amy. Hey, Bob, I wanted to go back to you just for a moment. We talked, I think the body of work, if we could, Andy, if we could go back to the previous slide, that's just, Bob talked about policies and their bylaws, and then the added complexity in our county office world is we have a board policy. Sometimes we have superintendent policies. We have superintendent regulations. Primarily, sometimes there might be a board regulation, but that's very limited when we do that, and exhibits that are helpful. But Bob, talk a little bit about the process. You all write up the policies, they're reviewed, go from start to finish to let our viewers today know really the depth of the review and the preparation that these policies and regulations go through.
Sure, you could be opening Pandora's box here. So
well, I don't want
our policy process is pretty in depth, right? So what Dennis and his team are constantly monitoring changes in the law, and separate and distinct from that, our policy consultants are also monitoring what's going on at the legislative level, and they're talking every week, every other week or so to compare notes and see what's happening, what's coming out, what's going to impact policies. As you can imagine, 100 to 125 of these things coming out a year. We can't do them all in one board policy update packet for the sanity of everyone involved, but our consultants sit down and they take those laws when they're enacted, and they review the policies to figure out which ones do they impact. And then they go through the drafting process of making the edits and revisions of those. And then separate from that, what they do is take a look at those policies and say, what is the unique county aspect to this policy? If they're looking at, maybe it's an FMLA change, and they look at it and say, that's really not that different from the county versus the district, other than that's a county superintendent policy, right? So that wouldn't be one where there's a real distinct change. But like, for example, charter schools, I believe in June, we've got a charter school oversight policy coming out, revisions to that. Charter school policies for county boards are unique. So they take that law and they look at how does it impact the district and how does it impact the county as well. And when we have those differentiations, they're actually creating a wholly separate policy or updating a wholly separate policy for the county offices. Then once those have all been drafted, we go through a lengthy internal review process. Keith and his team get involved. They do a legal review for us, and we'll often send some of these policies out for vetting by outside counsel, sometimes by outside agencies when it's warranted, so that they can weigh in on these policies as well. And that way, when we actually go to release them, they're about as sound as you can get in terms of covering A to Z for that particular topic. But again, they still need to be sort of customized for each local agency to use. For counties specifically, some of those have to, you have to make a little bit of a tweak to recognize the relationship between the county superintendent and the county board, and specifically to your county, right? Of the 58 counties, I don't know, I've probably done policy work directly for about 30 of them. And I think I've seen 30 different ways that the county board and the county superintendent interact, and that's reflected in policies as well.
Thanks, Bob. I think that just describing the process and where the foundation comes for these policies, and what you said earlier about, hey, once county board gets them, they become your policy. So you've got to work through them to make sure that there might be some twists and turns that is worthy of your local review. Well, I think we've reached the time, almost right on schedule, to get back to Amy this afternoon. If we could have that slide where we're going to talk a little bit about, she's going to go through county board and county superintendent roles and responsibilities. Amy?
Yeah, so one of the things I want to start off with the county board and superintendent is that it's a shared governance role. You have a 5 or a 7 member board, but you actually have an even number on the shared governance team because your county is superintendent. While they're not a voting member of your board, they are part of the team that makes the decisions for the County Office of Education. So next slide. So with that, it's represented here in this Venn diagram. The County Board of Education, as Bob was just talking and Keith was highlighting, they adopt the rules and the regulations, and those are all based upon Ed Code. And again, you can localize some pieces of it, but as you make those tweaks and other pieces, you adopt those, and those are how you operate and function, and the agreements that you make for how you're going to do business. You approve the annual budget, which means that you get to have conversations throughout the year and during the interim processes to look at the budget and then to monitor and see the progress of how you're doing fiscally. And for many of you who've been around and a board member for a while, you're going to understand the ebbs and flows of cash flow and where are you at, and do we need to, are we qualifying? Are we in a fiscal state? And you may hear your superintendent talk about, districts, but for you, it's approving your county office annual budget. You will review an annual audit. A third party group will actually do an audit and provide you input, and they'll give you a summary. Again, you'll review and adopt the annual audit. As a county board of education, you're going to acquire, lease, and convey real property. Those will all be done in a process that you'll work with your superintendent to understand what are the benefits, what are the options, what are those contracts, does it make sense, how long is it? Conversations that you'll again entertain and go through. You have a responsibility to fill vacant county seats, superintendent seat, if that happens. It has happened in my tenure, and you set the salary. And there's policies and regulations around that as well. And lastly, you govern juvenile court and county community schools. And with this, there becomes a responsibility that you're no different than a district in that sense. You are governing the schools that you oversee. You will adopt your LCAP. And then it's an interesting situation because then it goes to the superintendent and then it goes to the public superintendent for public instruction. So again, that's the overview of the County Board of Education trustee side of the house. If you're interested more in depth, this is one of those opportunities where the Masters in Governance series takes a far deeper dive and goes into the education code and discusses 1040 to 1048 and the nuances. And so this is just, again, a high level overview of some of those pieces. Now on the county superintendent side of the responsibilities, the Venn diagram here, is this: they superintend the schools in the county. They have different responsibilities that are, dedicated to them and them solely of overseeing. They visit and examine each school in the county. Does this mean them physically going out to every school? I got asked this yesterday. I was doing a county training and they said, how is that even possible? Well, they designate staff that actually visit the schools on their behalf in some cases, because obviously that's what they would be doing every day of their job if that was a necessary piece. They certify districts' fiscal health. So again, they just check in. The districts provide reports. They make sure that districts are doing well. They qualify them. And then they oftentimes, depending on the county offices and the services they provide, they assist them with ensuring that they get into a healthy place. They approve districts' LCAPs. So again, that's not the county board's responsibility. That's the superintendent. They typically have a team of individuals, of staff that have expertise in this area, and they make those recommendations. They provide in-service programs to districts and others. In some cases, you may hear the conversations that the superintendent is partnering with other superintendents. I live in Butte County, and we have a consortium of 9 county offices. So Butte, Glenn, Lassa, Modoc, Shasta, Siskiyou, Tehama, and Trinity counties have what's called the Northeast Regional Curriculum Committee. They work collectively because of the size of many of our county offices of education. They provide cross-county in-service programs. And so again, that's a great conversation to have with your superintendent to understand what your county is doing. Williams reviews of school districts. I'm sure many or all of you have seen Williams reports, and those are the things that you understand the properties and or disposals, and to ensure that there's adequate textbooks and other pieces provided to students and that facilities are up to par. And lastly, they enforce education code. And with this, it's ensuring that the schools in their schools that the county office oversees, if they do oversee students, and schools in general in the county are performing their duties as stated by education code. And collectively, they have the shared governance, which I talked at the very beginning. They have strategic goals and directions. So again, that's a deeper dive in a MIG course, setting direction and working together for strategic goals for the students that are being served. They create a shared vision. And then, as Dennis is going to talk about shortly, advocacy, both locally and at the state and federal level. So with that, next slide, I'm going to turn it back over, I believe, to Bob or Keith. Are you going to cover the role of the county board bylaw 9124 with attorneys?
Could we though just highlight a bit before Bob
Yeah,
gets to
absolutely.
the bylaw? If we could go back to the previous slide. I'm sorry, I was a little slow on my mute button. I mean, these are, I think what Amy was saying is that MIG, this is a Venn diagram that is used in MIG, but really, I mean, how many hours does MIG spend on talking about these roles and responsibilities of the county board and of the superintendent? I mean, I saw on our list here, I mean, they approve, the superintendent prepares budgets, the county approves budgets. Superintendent prepares LCAPs, county board approves the LCAPs, right? It could just go on and on and on. And that's what the middle's all about, right, Amy? Is this what you're talking about? Kind of, we've referenced it as a shared governance, but there's many terms of these mutual interests where working together, I mean, to get to the approval of the budget, take some input from the board so that it's just not that evening the budget's laid in front of them and here we go, approve it or else. That's the experience, at least that we've been having, that there is this teamwork that even though we have 5 and 7 board members, Amy added at least one for the county superintendent, and how in that dynamic it's so important to work together with a lot of these areas that really do move the county Office of Education forward. You agree with that, Amy?
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's one of the pieces that ongoing training and professional developments is essential for each board member. There's a lot. I mean, MIG in itself is over 40 hours. And that each of these areas is covered at some point in time, and sometimes in more than one, in one of the Masters of Governance courses. I mean, finance is a full day, and so is charter authorizing, which is even on here, and the charter authorizing and appeals and renewal process.
Right.
It's those pieces that, you have to understand and know. And, as Dennis is going to talk about shortly, the ever-changing laws or ed code and different things that come out, and the ripple effect of what that does to our policies and our practices. And that those conversations with the superintendent and the role of the board president that plays in this process of ensuring that if you don't have a governance calendar, is creating a calendar that kind of outlines. We know that the interim reports come in October and then again in the January timeframe. So really, and March. So really knowing when those interim reports are, coming to you, so that you can have the conversation ahead of time so that there's no surprises. And so that when it comes, you're fully understanding everything that's going on in anything that you're doing. And so that's the role of the board president, which is why we have board presidents training, because it's an essential piece of leading the team. They're an equal member to the others, but they have a great duty in agendizing and ensuring that things are captured and the conversations are had, and orientating and updating new board members who may not have some of the terminology understanding of the depth of these components.
And I think that while you touched on it, the county office has such an interesting dynamic, does it not, with the districts in the same county. We have county superintendents that approve budgets, county superintendents that approve LCAPs, that are involved in the other fiscal matters that you spoke of. We also have the appellate function of the county board, right? In those 3 areas that you mentioned: expulsion, interdistrict transfers, and charters. How does that, if you were to look at you've been on the county board for, this is your 3rd term?
10th year.
10th year.
So halfway through my 3rd term.
Yeah, and the relationship that the county board members have with districts and the like, can you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. County offices really are the intermediate units linking state policy with local districts programs and needs. And I think one of the things that I always tell county board members is that it's relationships. You know, we really don't have the ability to tell a district what to do. And it's the piece of how do we have a relationship with them so that when interdistrict transfers come or appeals come and we overturn or we move forward, that there's a relationship there, that it's collegial, because we're going to make decisions that don't always make everybody happy. And so how do we continue to create those conversations and understanding that, you know, we're doing what we believe needs to be done in the best interest of oftentimes the students, and that we have to kind of put the coins in the bank, so to speak, so that when those difficult conversations and time comes, that we can have them and not have hurt feelings. So again, it goes back to that relationships piece.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's spoken by somebody that has experienced it. So it is a very unique role. Speaking of a unique role, I'm now going to get to Bob. Let's push forward again, Andy, to, is it board bylaw 9124? Yes, Bob. Talk about
9124.
Talk about this unique role.
Yeah, so this is a really unique role, and it's perfect to come right after talking about the shared governance, because this it's kind of a complicated way that the statutes are set up around the attorney piece for county offices, but it really is also about that shared governance role. So under the education code, and this is unique to county offices, the county board of education and the county superintendent of schools need to appoint the same legal counsel. That comes out of Ed Code 35041.5. The duties of this shared counsel could include rendering legal advice to the county board or the superintendent or the county office of education in general as appropriate, serving the county board and county superintendent in preparation and conducting school district litigation and administrative proceedings, rendering advice in relation to school bond and tax increase measures, preparing all sorts of legal papers and forms necessary for voting on school bonds or tax increases, and rendering administrative duties that might be assigned by the county superintendent or the county board, right? So it's shared legal counsel. From a practical perspective, it's really usually the superintendent who's having that interaction with the shared attorney. And we know that the superintendent, you know, they're the executive officer, they're running the day-to-day of what's happening on the ground. And so they're the one who practically has the interactions with this shared counsel, but yet the law requires you to have this shared counsel. The attorney general has actually come out with opinions that say, outside of some special circumstances that are outlined in Education 1042, the county board cannot go out in addition to this shared legal counsel and appoint their own outside attorney. So that comes from the attorney general's opinion. It's not necessarily binding, but incredibly influential on the courts. And what the AG has basically said is, other than these specific provisions in Ed Code 1042, which is when, for some reason beyond the county board's control, that shared legal counsel has a conflict of interest, or they're failing to render timely advice on a particular matter, you can go out and seek independent counsel. If the services being sought by the county board are in addition to the kinds of services that are ordinarily obtained from that shared legal counsel, so maybe you need specific bond counsel, or you need somebody who's really specializing in a particular area of practice, that would be a time when you could go out and get independent legal counsel. Or if the county board desires a second legal opinion. So those are really the only times when the county board is going to go out and have their own legal counsel. And in other situations, it's going to be this shared counsel model. But what happens when you don't see eye to eye with the superintendent on who gets hired, right? That becomes complicated and it's not covered in the law. So as a general practice and looking towards this idea of shared governance and effective model of leadership, because the superintendent's going to be the one having that day-to-day interaction, kind of suggest that the best practice is to defer to the superintendent on who you're going to be hiring, because you also have this aspect where, when necessary, the county board can go out and seek those independent legal opinions under the three exceptions that I just described. Next slide, please. Another thing that we offer at CSBA, we've talked about legal services a little bit, but one of the reasons this is kind of great for county offices is you have that unique dynamic of the shared legal counsel. Again, best practice is probably to defer to the superintendent, who's going to be working more closely directly with that shared legal counsel if there's a dispute on which firm or which attorney to select. But CSBA's legal services program is one of those options that you have, right? So if you were to select CSBA's legal services to serve as that shared legal counsel, it kind of helps to create a little bit of a balance, right? Because now your board members are typically going to be pretty comfortable with CSBA as your association, but we're also attorneys who are representing the interests of the county office in its entirety and working directly with the superintendent. When you sign up, you have access to the resource library and all the other benefits, but really it creates that attorney-client relationship that allows you to get direct legal advice and for us to serve as that shared counsel. That's how most county offices use legal services. Some, the other option is that you could sign up just to use the legal resource library and then call on our attorneys solely for those exceptions that are listed in 1042, for the second opinions and whatnot. But it's just another resource that we make available to help you navigate kind of a tricky area of shared governance, which is the county office attorney.
Thanks, Bob. I'll say it twice. This time I'm not muted. No, really, this is a delicate area. We have issues lately that have arisen that involve really the issue of joint representation. I mean, what does an attorney do when they are representing both the same legal counsel, representing both the county superintendent and the county board, where there might be the interests that diverge? Certainly Bob's team can handle those issues. I think as we move forward, there might be a little bit more definition as to what a same legal counsel might mean. But until then, I mean, it's almost like, hey, work together, do the best you can. But we know that when it comes to valuation and termination and compensation, I mean, these are issues that become part of that shared governance model that, you really should, as best as you can, implement at this period of time to get that legal counsel that could represent both the board and the superintendent. So thanks, Bob, with your insight on that. And now we have Dennis Meyers, who's just been waiting for his time in the sun. So take it away, Dennis.
My time in the sun. That's funny. Thank you, Keith. What's interesting about county services and legislative advocacy, which is what I do. So I oversee the governmental relations part at CSBA. And if the lights go out where I am, I'm actually sitting in the Madera County Office of Education right now, getting ready for a 2:00 presentation. So if I'm the only one in this big room here at their Professional Development Center, and if the lights go out, it's because they are conserving energy like all of you are trying to do. But let's go through and just talk pretty quickly here about some budget issues and some legislative issues. And just, so that as county board members, in the Government Relations Office, we've got our staff of lobbyists. We analyze legislation. We have conversations with our legislative committee as we kind of pick their brains on issues, and also they take positions on it. There are county board members that are on the legislative committee. And then really just the conversations throughout the state that we have with county boards of education on these issues, always feeding into what we are doing. So while I'm only going to talk about a couple of issues here, the 120 plus bills that we have positions on right now, and we are at the Capitol or in Washington, we're always talking about county boards of education, county offices of education, school districts together and kind of not leaving any of them separated out, unless there's just one issue that's straight, a county issue. We're not going to talk about that, in relation with school districts, but just so that, we're always looking out and making sure that we're covering the issues. So on the budget, the governor's budget May revision just out a couple of weeks ago. Lots of news in there and lots of good news actually for county offices of education. So just, kind of base program issues. The governor is proposing to fully fund the statutory COLA. I don't think that's news to everybody, but there are counter proposals coming from legislative analysts to perhaps lower that COLA. And, we know COLA is important to you as county boards. It's also important to school district boards of education. So we're really pushing as hard as we can to just, push the whole idea of a lower COLA out kind of off into the trash can. But what that means is COLA for LCFF. We know that the county LCFF works slightly differently than the school district LCFF. So the part of the county LCFF that does get statutory COLA would get this COLA. That's the operations side. Also, special education and a lot of the other, all of the other programs that call for statutory COLA, the governor is proposing to fund. And that is happening, as the legislature is discussing the budget, because that's what happened. The governor proposes January, modifies in May, then the legislature adopts their version, and then they all start talking in anticipation of a June 15th budget adoption. Some of the things one of the things that is not included in this, and it's something that I know that it's important for county boards and for school districts, is that there isn't any additional assistance for the employer contributions for CalSTRS and CalPERS. So while on the CalSTRS side, those rates are pretty much set right now at about 19.1%. We know that there's a full 1.5 almost increase on the CalPERS side. And a couple of years ago, you remember we had money coming in from the state general fund. It was outside of Proposition 98 to buy down those rates by 2 percentage points. We are still lobbying that. We're never going to not lobby it. It's just that in this budget, the governor sees things as pretty tight on the state general fund and is keeping commitments on other parts where they're giving us non-Prop 98 money, but there's no additional assistance on the employer pensions. So I want to bring that out as well. We have some good news on, base program funding and the commitment to that. There are some issues that we're still pressing on that we know that are important to governing boards and to county superintendents as well. Other things that are in the May revision is one of the issues I'll talk about on the next slide, but right here is all the work that we're doing with the County Superintendents Association on juvenile court and community schools. One of the things that is in the governor's May revision is the creation of a block grant that is really targeting the services that you all provide at your juvenile court and community schools. This is actually an exciting development, and it's tucked into about a $80 million increase in funding for county offices of education. And what this block grant is, it's a per juvenile court community school ADA grant that is meant to really enrich the program. And I'm just going to say provide funds so that the services you provide to these students equals the services that school districts are providing the students that they have. That to us is exciting. Because if we ever get pushback from school districts saying, hey, why is this money going to county offices? We say, because these are students that are in county offices right now and court community schools. They're going to come back to you in a month or 3 or 5. So, these services are important while they're with the counties, and pretty much everybody nods and says, yeah, you're right. This is important. One of the other things that the governor recognizes is there is additional work for differentiated assistance that is going to be required as part of the May revision and this budget. So there's a 50% increase in what each county office gets to provide the differentiated assistance. And this is what the county offices do as they come alongside school districts in their county to assist them when they're not meeting standards. On the legislative issues, let's go to the next slide. We've got legislation that, as I mentioned, that we are working on with the county superintendents. We're co-sponsoring AB 906. And the reason why I kind of referenced this a little bit on the prior page. So we do have this bill. It's actually still in the Assembly Education Committee, but this equalizes kind of the core resources that are provided to juvenile court and community schools. So the governor actually liked this idea and included it as part of the May revision. So you'll see that there's this base level of funding. I think it's of about $300,000 for all court and community schools, just to make sure that there's this, I'm kind of like infrastructure equity funding, right? Because as your average daily attendance goes up and down, because you've got students that are there 2-3 weeks, they go back, you've got another one who's there 5 or 8 weeks. There's so much fluctuation in your ADA that it's really hard to figure out kind of that base level of staffing that you need. The governor agrees with AB 906 and the premise there, and so has included this level of funding in the May revision. So that part is in the May revision, and so we're working very closely with county superintendents to make sure that that stays. Where this is on the assembly side. They approved some, they approved future funding of this, and then tried to tie it to some future accountability language that really ties the hands of county superintendents. And they're saying, hey, it's more about, transparency and things like that. And we're kind of saying, this isn't a new program. These kids have been being served for decades now. Why are you treating it like a brand new program? The Senate has heard us and said they've approved the language. They've approved the funding in their version as proposed by the governor. So we will eventually, I think, see maybe some trailer bill language that is on, publishing LCAPs, and what you're all going to do with juvenile court and community schools. There may be some of that in this, but we're really working to keep this money protected and provided in the state budget. So that's exciting. So the bill isn't moving because this is now part of the budget discussion. And so that is actually exciting too. We've heard a lot of discussion earlier about student board members and what's in AB 275 as far as compensation. In our conversations with county boards, we also realized that there was something that needed to be cleaned up on the bill that passed a couple of years ago with actually appointing student board members. And there is an issue with county boards. If you receive no petition to appoint a student board member, it was unclear then if you actually did have the authority. So we're running AB 417. This bill is kind of really sailed through the assembly and is sitting now in the Senate Education Committee. And what this does, it says whether or not you have a petition, you can appoint a student board member from one of your programs. So again, it's a cleanup. It clarifies the law. It's a companion to AB 275 on compensation, and we should see this thing continuing to move. So keep your communication flowing. We love the comments we get through emails and then feeding into the legislative committee process. And we represent school districts and county boards of education, and wherever we're in the Capitol or in Washington, D.C., we're always talking about both because of the important services that you provide at the county board level. So I'll be quiet now and sit and see if there's any questions and hand it back to you, Keith.
Thanks, Dennis. There is a question for you, but before we get to that, the background on AB 417 is that we heard from a county board in particular that they had found this, I'll call it a nuance. I think the author is referencing it as an oversight that, oh, gee, if there isn't a petition brought forward by the students, then the existing laws, they can appoint, but only from the high schools and of the districts, not from their own program. So
right.
In talking to the Brain Trust in Governmental Relations, we came up with this, got an author who initially, didn't Assembly Member Bennett recently author a pretty important bill with respect to
with student boards, and this is, we consider this cleanup, but it is just really targeting that nuance that you said is there, with county boards.
What do you think the prospects are? I saw where it got out of one committee on its way to another.
Yeah, I mean, it sailed out of the assembly, unanimous vote. It's now in the Senate Education Committee. Senate Education Committee won't probably take it up until after the budget is done. So those policy committees kind of wait until they get the budget done. So we don't see anything standing in the way of this because it's it's kind of no-brainer legislation, but I can't predict anything other than we have a really good sense that this is going to move forward.
Thanks. And probably right, Dennis, it's not urgency legislation. So if it does move forward, get signed into law by the governor, January 1 is when it would take place. So it might not, this first round for county boards that are don't have students coming forward, they would be limited at least before January 1 to
Sure.
selecting from the high schools and the districts in their county.
Sure. And Keith, and you just made me think of something that we might be able to do a little bit later is maybe add urgency. I mean, if it's passing with more than 2/3 vote, I mean, you can add urgency and then it does take effect. That would just mean that it would
Well,
take
that would be great.
September versus January, but that, that's an important 3 or 4 months that you could do right away. So,
Right, and because the initial law was passed, or it didn't take place for a year or almost 2 years.
yeah, they pushed it out.
Right, they pushed it out.
Yep. And this is a good example of what Bob and Amy were talking about the conversations between our department and their department, because we're having the conversation so that if this does take effect, let's say January, or if we do fast forward it to something sooner, our policy department will write the policy, get it out the door so that county boards know right away what they can do.
Well, thanks, Dennis. I'm going to bring Kristen on. We do have a question for you. It's right along the lines of county board members and student board members. Kristen?
Yeah, so this is from Bina Lefkowitz, and she, I'm just gonna go ahead and read what she put in the chat. I did respond in writing as well, but I thought it'd be a good discussion. She says, we're seeking to bring on a student board member and want to bring on one of our students in our court and community schools in a program we have called Senior Extension that serves students up to age 21 to complete high school. We believe that these students need to get a stipend or be paid as an intern who, as part of their internship, can serve on our board, given they are generally low income and need to work. We get a stipend as adult board members. I believe the law needs to be changed for county COE school board members. They are a unique student group. I think she meant student board members. They're a unique student group.
Yeah. Well, and I think your answer is spot on, Kristen, is that just needs to be absolutely clarified. So I think that's the basis of AB 275. And you did the link there. So while we're, in this webinar, go ahead and press that link and then just kind of save it. It'll take you to the legislative website so you can read what that bill does on compensation. So I think that's, a good question. And you answered it correctly because that's what the legislature is trying to take care of right now.
And this law, it was interesting. I took a look at it this morning because it's both for districts and for county boards. So amends both 1000 of the Ed Code with the county board and then the Education Code section dealing with districts. But you all, I'm sure, are familiar with the statutory stipend requirements, which is basically by the ADA. Stipends are included in the law. You can always go above that 5% a year, but that's how the stipends are. Here are the stipends in addition to Bob was talking about course credit, but these stipends are then established by the county board. They're not established in statute. Mm-hmm. It will be left to the discretion of the county board, one, to determine if there are stipends, and two, what the level of that stipend will be if AB 275 passes.
Right. Yep.
And for our viewing audience, now's the time. We've got about 19 minutes left. If you have questions that are germane or maybe even not, if you'd like to send those questions in, Kristen will be able to get those questions now, and we'll be able to respond. There is one in the chat that's a bit of a stumper. So Kristen, I'm willing to, and Bob's here too. And then let's have our other co-counsel, Amy and Dennis, throw in. Why don't you read us that question and see if we can maybe get it right?
Sure. This is from an anonymous attendee who asked if a board member receives a monthly stipend for attending meetings and declines it so that the money can be donated back to this county scholarship fund. Is this a tax deductible contribution?
All righty then.
I'll take a guess.
That's a good question.
Oh, good. I like the guess from the non-lawyer. Let's go there first.
I've got a
It's probably
sense.
gonna won't be as convoluted, that's for sure.
I would say no, because if you're declining it, then you're not accepting it and you're not paying taxes on it. So then how would you get a tax credit on it because you didn't pay taxes on it to begin with? So if you'd like to accept it and pay taxes on it, then you could rightfully turn it back over what's left and have it add to your annual income.
Wow.
The other
So
non-attorney on here agrees with that, but you got to talk to your tax people about
That's
that.
an interesting, okay.
I think that Amy just passed the law school exam. That's how I would read this as well. Once you've accepted it, you can generally, again, we're not tax attorneys, but generally donations to scholarship funds, as long as it's to an entity that is you can take charitable deductions from, is going to be a tax write-off. But I don't think you can defer not accepting the money and then have the school district and then somehow claim tax credit for it, right? Because you never actually took possession of the money. That would be my answer to that. But again, as Dennis said, you need a tax attorney.
Before you go
You're a
to the
special
tax
breed.
attorney, let's go to the second part of the question, because I really like the way you guys answered the first part. The second part is, okay, I do what Amy just rolled out. And here I've got, I have a stipend of $220. I now am looking at $140. Can it be donated and as a deduction to, was it the county office, Kristen?
County
Office Scholarship Fund?
Yeah, the scholarship fund.
So why don't you riff on that a little bit?
I think it's going to depend on the setup of the scholarship fund. My assumption is that it would be a 501c3. There's another IRS code that allows for political subdivisions, which I believe includes county offices, to have a tax deductible or a charitable contribution set up so that it's tax deductible. But without knowing how the county scholarship fund is set up, we can't really opine on whether donations are. I don't know why anyone would set up a scholarship fund without tax deductible donations. I mean, that's kind of the lure to get people to donate. So it's probably the case. But I think Bob is correct. An accountant can give you better individual tax advice. But if it's a tax deductible organization, then it should be fine.
So that's what you check into. One, the process described by co-counsel, Dennis and Amy, and then Bob threw in and gave an A+. And then really look at what, this doesn't go in the general fund is what Kristen's saying. Like there's got to be an entity that's set up in order to receive these type of donations. Do we have anything else?
No other questions in the Q&A or chat.
No questions about establishing a superintendent's salary or anything like that? Okay. All righty. Should we have, let's go to the next slide then, if we're out of the Q&A. Resources. There's really, I think we've talked about it earlier this afternoon, the AEC, how that's a tremendous opportunity, not just to network, as Amy talked about, but these sessions of the strands. Do we have the strands identified? We may not yet.
We do, and they're on the website, so you'll be able to find information out about all of that pieces.
Right, so it's all there, and then the sessions that go within it's just a great training opportunity, especially for our newbies. Again,
one of the things that isn't on here, Keith, and this is one Dennis would be able to, and I think what we can do is ask that it's sent out, is that I receive the advocacy updates via text, and I think it's one of the most essential pieces for me to receive those text messages.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking that advocacy updates that come like call to action.
Yes, and I think that if you are not signed up for call to action, it would be really important.
Dennis, Meyers, declare.
So if you guys talk really slowly, I'm going to go get that address, and it's something you text CSBA for Kids to a phone number, and I'm going to put that in. If I put it in chat, will it show up for everybody, or do I have to come back? Is it okay? Okay. So just give me about 30
Okay,
seconds.
good.
I just
We'll,
need to go
we'll,
get
we'll
it. So
talk
keep talking.
about, I mean, Bob went thoroughly through our gamut, Amy through MIG, Dennis just with our updates, legal services. You know, that's, there's really incredible resources there. Please become a client of District and County Office Legal Services, and you'll have access to the resources. And one in particular that we talk about, right, Bob, is well, why don't you just talk a little bit about what's behind the wall?
Yeah, of course. So we have, in addition to creating the attorney-client relationship that we talked about, right, we have access to a legal resource library that we have created and managed. It's exclusive to legal services clients, so you have to sign up for the program. But then once you get there, we have a separate website. Log into the website. You can actually submit questions directly through it and all of that good stuff. But the resource library itself has, we're close to 12,000 documents right now, I believe, in there. A lot of these are collective bargaining agreements, salary schedules, MOUs, and the actual agreements themselves. Maybe a little bit less germane to counties than districts, except for when you look at the things like salary schedules and employing people, right? Like it's not just about bargaining, it's about recruiting and retaining quality staff, and that applies to everybody, right? So it's a valuable set of resources. You can search those by even down to the bargaining unit type, but you can do it by region, type of LEA, rural, size of the LEA, all of those kind of things. And then in addition to that, the resource library has unique resources like our webinars that we do. We do a monthly lunch and learn for our clients where we sit down, we pick a topic. Most recently, we covered Title IX and some of the new guidance coming out on that. We talk a little bit about what's happened, what the changes are, what the topic is for about 30, 45 minutes or so. And then we open it up to our clients to just have a time to chat and Q&A with the attorneys that are on the call. It's real informal, it's real informative, and it's actually a pleasure for us to work with our clients through that resource. And in addition, you get some different discounts when you sign up. You know, if you do a training through our legal services team, we have a Brown Act training we do twice a year, and we can do more specific things, but you get discounts on those trainings. And then one other resource, it's not really listed as a CSBA publication here, but it is a publication. It's something we put together with LexisNexis, who's one of the premier legal research entities in the nation. We sat down with them and put together a 3-volume set of all the statutes and regulations, state statutes and regulations that are germane to K-12 education. So it's not just the education code, but it's the provisions of the penal code or the government code or family and welfare code, all of those kind of things, all collected together in a single volume. So you don't have to go out and buy 10 different versions of a code book. You can just buy this 3-volume set. And if you're a CSBA member, which you all are, you get a discount off of it. If you're a CSBA legal services client, you get a deeper discount on it. So all that's available on our bookstore website at csba.org.
So I have a quick question for you, Bob, is if someone's interested in understanding what the cost to become part of legal services, who would they reach out to?
That would be legal services at csba.org or myself. And the cost, thank you for mentioning it, Amy. It's very cost effective. We had a slide that said affordable legal services. It's just 10%. To sign up is 10% of whatever your CSBA dues are. Once you sign up, that creates that relationship. If you have legal questions, then our attorneys bill at only $200 an hour, which is a very affordable price for legal advice. And you get the first 3 hours of that absolutely free of charge. In addition, if you're a Gamut Policy Plus subscriber starting for this new year, you are able to get 2 hours of free or no charge legal advice on your policies, specific to policies. So all said, that's 5 free hours. It adds up to $1,000 of value of attorney time. For most entities, when you sign up, your annual subscription is $1,000 or less, right in that neighborhood. So it's a very valuable resource and very cost effective for counties.
The last question is, can they have CSBA legal services and maintain their current law firms?
100%.
Well,
Most of our clients have either in-house or outside legal counsel they work with. There's absolutely nothing that prevents you from doing that. Even the county office structure where you have to have that shared legal counsel, there is nothing that prevents a superintendent from going out and hiring multiple attorneys, multiple legal firms. So if CSBA, if you wanted to sign up for legal services through CSBA, we could serve that role as shared legal counsel, and the superintendent could still continue to engage in with other law firms or other attorneys as necessary. So absolutely not a problem to have multiple attorneys.
thanks, Bob. So what we've got, we want to go into a little bit our CSBA publications, where with the Brown Act, it's digital version. You can get it at on our website. It's updated every year. We have call to order, which helps board presidents especially manage the meetings that have lately, in some instances, needed to be managed. And our charter schools guide, which we just updated in 2020 to account for the reforms of AB 1505 and 1507. Again, all on our website. We do have Kristen, we've got a question. Oh, well, let's just leave that. This was great and succinct. I really appreciate that. Will you be hosting another one so we can invite some of our new board members? Well, I think if there is, and we were hoping to get the new board members, we understand that a very high percentage of our county board members and district board members since 2020 or 2018, it's I don't know, 40%, 50% are new board members. We were hoping to get some today. I'm hoping they're even still on as I'm indicating that. But yeah, we'll run this through Naomi Eason, who is with us today, and we can talk about having something for new board members in the future. Anything else? I think we've lost Dennis. Anything else from our panelists? Well, I'd like to thank everyone, both the panelists, Bob, Dennis, and Amy. Your time and your input and your contribution to our viewers today was really good, and I'm sure it was appreciated, and that's what they mean by succinct. Kristen, thank you for helping with the questions, and Andy for putting this all together. And actually, the person who helped organize this behind the scenes, so to speak, get the speakers, get our subjects, get everything together, was Naomi Eason. So I'd like to thank her. And of course, thank you for taking a little bit longer than your lunch hour to be with us this afternoon to go through some of the services that CSBA offers, but more importantly, to discuss some of our experience and the information that we've been able to provide you today will be helpful as you continue your really most important role as a county board member here in California. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you again the next time a webinar for county board members is presented by CSBA.